The US has been attacking the Houthis in Yemen since this weekend, and a lot of people, including Trump supporters, are wondering why in the heck are we attacking the Houthis? What did they do to us exactly that would require us to be bombing them, killing dozens of people, including children? Who are the Houthis? What are they fighting for? That is the name of a book written by Caleb Maupin, our guest. He is a journalist, political analyst, co director for the Center for Political Innovation. Caleb, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Sure, always a pleasure.
So who are the Houthis? I mean, this is a lot of people are wondering what in the heck are we doing there? We're hearing in the news that they're backed by Iran. This is an Iranian proxy, and we're basically I mean, Trump has basically said the Houthis who are in Yemen, a country that doesn't even border Iran, is that when they attack, that Iran is responsible for a completely different sovereign country, and the attacks coming from a different country, clearly looking like we're marching headfirst into war with Iran. So are the Houthis Iran? Are they Iranian? Who are they?
Well, the idea that the Houthis are just agents of Iran or proxies of Iran is absurd, namely because if that were the case, the war in Yemen would have ended in a week, maybe 2 weeks. But the fighting has been going on in the country since 2015, really since 2003. And the Houthis have a huge amount of support on the ground. I mean, the Houthis are Arabs. The Iranians are Persians. The Shia Muslims of Iran are Twelvers, whereas the Houthis are Zaydis. They are technically Shias, but they pray like Sunnis. They have different religious beliefs. They are a movement in Yemen, and they do take inspiration from the Islamic Revolution of Iran, no question about it. But they are their own movement. They have their own goals and aims, and they have a huge amount of support among the Yemeni population. So to reduce them to being proxies of Iran, that's just a huge oversimplification. If they were that, why do they have so much massive support on the ground in Yemen? Really, among some of the poorest people in the world. I mean, Yemen is a country where much of the population doesn't have electrification of their home, much of the population doesn't have running water, and the Zaydi Shia Muslims, they've been living in the mountainous regions of Yemen for well over 1,000 years. The word Houthi, the term Houthi is a tribal term. It refers to like a tribal ethnicity kind of in Yemen. And these folks, they've been living there for thousands of years. They have deep ties of blood and connections, and they are very, very dedicated to this movement. It's been around for quite some time. It originated as the Young Believers, which was a youth group. Hussein al-Houthi was a member of the parliament who studied in Sudan. He was a Zaydi Shia Muslim. He led the Young Believers, a youth group of religious Muslims for young people that provided literacy and medical care. He had a medical program where a lot of people in Yemen were able to get medical care through his program, and they have been building this movement. They became Ansar Allah in 2003, and they've been fighting really ever since. And they have a huge amount of support, and they are ready to fight. And I think what Trump doesn't seem to realize is that this movement, they really do believe that this is the fulfillment of prophecy. Their founder, Hussein al-Houthi, told them that there would be a time when they, the Yemenis, would stand with the Palestinians in a way that no one else would. And so he's dead, but now they see this as the moment that their founder predicted, and they are ready to die. Shia Islam emphasizes martyrdom, and it's the highest honor to give your life for God, to give your life for the oppressed. And so the idea that they're going to back down in the face of a huge amount of civilian casualties and the face of their power plants being destroyed, that's absurd. They are ready to fight. They see the whole world hating Israel and what it's doing and cheering for them. So you got to talk to them. I mean, Trump
Yeah.
needs to negotiate with them. You're not going to solve this. The idea that you're going to bomb them, kill some civilians, kill some buildings, maybe kill some of their leaders, and then they'll say, "Oh, we're sorry," and back down. Not going to happen. These folks
Right.
are ready to fight.
Well, what's really insane about it is that their demand has been so simple. I mean, they've just said stop the bombardment in Gaza. They did stop their attacks on the ships when the ceasefire was enacted. But then, as soon as Israel decided to renege on the ceasefire agreement, they refused to move into phase two, and instead tried to the strong arm Hamas into a new negotiation, a new deal, essentially after going back on their word on the first deal. And then when Hamas says no, we're still interested in pursuing the first deal that we already agreed to, Israel then says, well, then we're blockading you, we're starving your people, and now they're bombing. We're bombing. I mean, we give them the bombs. They're bombing the Palestinians, and the Houthis are their demand is so simple: stop killing the people and give them the humanitarian aid. But we would rather bomb the Houthis than allow Palestinians to have sacks of flour. I mean, that's where we're at as a country.
Well, look, I mean, Trump and his administration and a lot of people around the world, including people that are quite critical of Israel, have pointed out that what the Houthis are doing in the Red Sea is illegal. And yeah, it's absolutely illegal. And in old time labor union struggles, there's a tactic called a picket line, where you set up a picket line in front of a business and you block people from entering. And you know what? That is illegal. And that's basically what the Houthis have done. They have set up a picket line in the Red Sea. And they're saying, look, we're enforcing a boycott of Israel until you stop bombing the Palestinians. And yes, it is absolutely illegal what they are doing, but so is the bombing of Gaza. And as far as they are concerned, they have a moral obligation to do this. And this is what their movement has been aspiring to do since the time it was created. They were going to be the champions of Israel, it's of opposition to Israel in the region. The Houthi movement, they have what they call the cry in the face of the arrogant. It's 5 slogans. If you ever see any of the Houthi rallies, you'll see this poster with 5 slogans painted on it in green writing and red writing. The slogans are God is great, victory to Islam, death to America, death to Israel, curse be upon the Jews. And that is the 4 principles upon which their movement stands. Now, that slogan, curse be upon the Jews, that's been misrepresented as a call for genocide in media. The ADL and others have claimed that's a call for genocide. What they're saying is that essentially Israel was created in an impure way. In Shia Islam, they talk about haram, right? The concept of sin, and how if something is created in a sinful way, it becomes tainted, right? If you steal food and you eat it, it might make you sick. If you buy a house that violates the Islamic law with a loan or whatever, that house might crash and might catch on fire or fall in, right? And that if something is acquired in an impure way, it's cursed. And they argue that the way Israel was created with the theft of Palestinian lands makes it cursed. It is tainted. It is haram. And that there is a curse upon the Jews because of the way that Israel was acquired. And that is a religious principle. And they feel the same way about the United States and the way, we were created with the genocide of the Native Americans, the transatlantic slave trade. And they view it as their mission to spread Islam and to fight against Israel. And they view America and Israel as outposts of Western colonialism. They view themselves as fighting for the economic development of the Yemeni people. The slogan economic development is very central in what they believe. And they also are really big advocates of the Second Amendment and the right to own guns. Obviously, they don't have our Constitution, but it is part of their religious belief that every man must have a firearm. And that's why when you see their rallies, they all wave their guns in the air, because they believe it is Islamic teaching that you must have a firearm. And really, the war between them and the previous Yemeni government started because they tried to disarm them. They tried to tell them they didn't have the right to bear arms, and they said, "No, you're not going to disarm us." And that's really how the conflict got started. As Shia Muslims, they said we have the right to maintain our own arms, the right to our own militias, etc. So it's quite an interesting conflict. But I think that people in the United States, we really just don't understand how they are prepared to die. These are some of the poorest people in the world. They have been trained their whole life to believe that it is the highest honor to fight for the Palestinians, to fight for the oppressed, to oppose Israel, to stand up for Islam. They're ready to fight, and they're not going to back down. And Iran cannot control them. Iran may give them some support in one way or another, but the idea that the supreme leader of Iran or the president can call them up and say, "All right, stop blocking ships in the Red Sea," they would just look at them and say, "No, we're going to keep doing this." This is a matter of religious principle. When they first started seizing ships, I don't know if you saw this, some of the ships were seized and they became tourist attractions. And Yemenis from all over the country were going to those ships, getting on the ships and crying and praying. They thought this is the highest honor their country has ever had. Their country is standing with the Palestinians in a way that no other country is. They're not going to back down. They're just not going to back down.
So when the Houthis say things, I mean, look, I think anybody in the United States, when we hear, well, most of us, when we hear that these groups want to spread Islam, I don't want to be is I don't want to study or practice Islam. I have no interest in being a Muslim. When I hear phrases like "death to America" or "death to Israel," that's off-putting, right? I mean, these phrases are off-putting, even though I don't agree with the apartheid state of Israel or the whatever you want to, however you want to label Israel. I don't agree with that country and what it's doing. But even just the phrase "death to America," this is something that really jolts people, and this type of phrasing actually causes Americans to want to go to war. I mean, I was at a bar last night, St. Patrick's Day, right? And I'm overhearing, and I'm in Idaho right now. I'm overhearing Americans in the bar talking about, well, we have to stop them because they're trying to spread Islam, or we have to stop them because they say "death to America." We can't have that. What do you think they're going to do to us? So that those types of the idea of Islam spreading, the idea of "death to America" is very frightening to even just the most average American who has a 9 to 5 job, goes to the bar, has a green beer on St. Patrick's Day. This is off-putting. Why do they need to use these phrases, and what do they mean by "death to America"?
Well, that is the point. What do they mean by death to America? What does America mean to them? Because when I think about America, I think about a country founded on principles of freedom. I think about, struggling to have a better life and build up and develop. But when they think of America, they think of a military power that is arming Israel, that is beating down and destroying countries, that has backed numerous brutal authoritarian regimes throughout their region. They think about a country that has kept them in poverty, that enabled Saudi Arabia to bomb them. I mean, when Saudi Arabia was bombing and destroying Yemen, starting in 2015, when the war really escalated, the whole world was saying what Saudi Arabia was doing was a violation of international law. They were not allowing food into the country, et cetera. And the whole world was condemning it. And the USA just continued to back Saudi Arabia as they committed these crimes. And that's what's really heartbreaking. When I was in Iran in 2015, I was the only American in an auditorium of Iranians chanting "death to America." And I broke down. And tears poured down my face. But to them, America means something very, very different. And I feel like it's my job as an American to show the world that there is another America. Because when I think about the Houthis, when it really gets down to it, this group of very, very fanatical religious people who've lived up in the mountains, who believe in the right to bear arms and have fought for their religious freedom and have fought off a foreign king who's come in and tried to impose his way on them and are demanding economic development. I can see a lot of America in what the Houthis are fighting for. There is something, that has a lot of parallels with our own history in the Houthi movement and how they're developing. But yes, to them, America is a globalist imperialist system that has kept their country impoverished. In my book, I quote one of the sermons of Hussein al-Houthi, where he talks about how Yemen has a huge amount of arable land, but yet they import their food largely from American companies, from Turkish companies, from other countries, because they haven't been able to develop their own agriculture. And the aid that is sometimes provided to Yemen, it's not the aid they need. They need to develop their own industries. And they have a huge amount of oil. Yemen has a huge amount of oil, but it's in the ground. And they would like to develop that oil and sell it on the international market. And Saudi Arabia, that was one of the main reasons Saudi Arabia was fighting them, is they wanted to keep that oil in the ground. They didn't want the competition. And Yemen remains one of the poorest countries in the world, despite having a huge amount of natural resources. And they blame that on an international system that they view Israel and America as an outpost of.
Yeah. What has been the beef between Saudi Arabia and Yemen? Is it that they have different religions? I mean, they're both Muslim, but one is Sunni. Saudi Arabia is Sunni, and the Houthis are Shia. Is it that are the Saudis trying to impose their form of Islam onto the Houthis, vice versa? Are the Houthis trying to expand and take over Saudi Arabia? I mean, what was the beef between those two that caused Saudi Arabia to bomb them for so relentlessly for so long, using American weapons also?
It's about control. Yemen is a small, impoverished country. Saudi Arabia has the fourth largest military budget in the world. They're a huge oil exporting country with a huge amount of wealth, and they viewed Yemen as their property. In 2011, after the Arab Spring, they had an election in Yemen to elect a new leader, and there was only one candidate on the ballot. Mansour Hadi, the Saudis' guy, and he
Mhm.
won surprisingly. Imagine that, the only candidate on the ballot. And the Houthi movement, they rejected that. And I do want to point out the Houthis are Shia Muslims, but there are quite a few Sunnis in Yemen, and there are quite a few people in Yemen that are Sunni but are secular, meaning that they don't really want a religious government. And the Houthis have built a real coalition. They are kind of the fighting force for Yemeni sovereignty. But the Sunni Shia issue must be pointed out. Saudi Arabia is not good to Shia Muslims. Shia Muslims in Saudi Arabia, there's a lot of Shia in Saudi Arabia. They're second class citizens. They're only able to work in jobs involving manual labor. They have no rights. Their ability to just have routine religious services is frequently interfered with. And Saudi Arabia, they are Wahhabis. They are Sunni Wahhabis. They very much have the ideology that says we should go back to the time of the Prophet, etc. They're kind of upholding a 1400s style political model. And they very much view Shia Muslims as apostates, etc. And Barack Obama and his administration really tried to polarize the Muslim world between Sunnis and Shias and really play up the idea that Shia are all agents of Iran, that all the Shia are agents of Iran. Iran is trying to take over the whole world with Shia Islam, etc. And Saudi Arabia seemed to have aligned with Obama and that strategy, which was pushed by Israel. And we now have a leaked email came out from WikiLeaks of Hillary Clinton saying a Sunni-Shia war would be to the benefit of Israel. I'm playing up the idea that Shia are no good, that Shia are apostates, etc. And so, of course, the idea of a large Shia religious movement having a lot of influence in Yemen, which is a country that Saudi Arabia considered to be their property. It was their backyard, and they had the right to control it. They had the right to impose presidents on it. Yeah, Saudi Arabia is not gonna be thrilled about that. But the Yemeni people, they maintain they have the right to their independence. South Yemen used to be a communist country during the Cold War. You had the Democratic People's Republic of Yemen in the south, and then North Yemen remained a capitalist country, etc. Then the two countries merged after the fall of the Soviet Union. And at that point, it seemed like Yemen had kind of lost its sovereignty. There was something called the Southern Movement, which was trying to restore communism or at least the independence of South Yemen. And that there are a lot of different forces in the country. This is a very tribal region. This is a very underdeveloped country. But the Houthis have built what they call their Revolutionary Committee, their Supreme Council, which includes representatives of various different political forces, many of which are Sunni, many of which are secular. There are Arab nationalists in their coalition. There's the former Marxist-Leninist ruling party of South Yemen, the Yemeni Socialist Party, the faction called Yemeni Socialist Party. Anti-aggression is part of their council and their coalition. There's even a feminist party called the Arab Hope Party that is a feminist and pacifist party that has representation in the Houthi government. And the leader of it, Layla Al-Thwar, she has actually been threatened by a lot of Muslims who don't appreciate her message, and the Houthis provide her personal security to make sure that this feminist, who leads a feminist political party, is protected. So it's not like the Houthis are trying to create a government on their own religious principles. They don't have a majority. Most Yemenis are not Shia. However, they have the fighting force. They have the guns. They have the army. And they were the bulk of the forces in Yemen fighting for their national liberation, their sovereignty against Saudi domination. And because of that, various other forces have aligned with them. They have the guns, they have the military. And so they sit at the center of this coalition that is asserting Yemen's national liberation and is now involving Yemen in the Israel-Palestine conflict in a very, very dramatic way.
What do you think is going to happen with Iran and this the Trump administration using any attack coming from the Houthis? He says is an attack by Iran, and Iran will face the dire consequences. So you've got all of these Trump supporters or people who've been pretty staunch Republicans now coming out and saying we don't want war with Iran. This is a mistake. I mean, you got Marjorie Taylor Greene saying I don't want to go to war. We don't have any Americans who want to go to war, especially on behalf of another country. So she's pointing out this is Israel's war. This isn't for the United States. Do you think that, I mean, the first administration, Trump did a lot of aggression against Iran. It did not escalate into a war, thank goodness, but there were definitely signs that it could have. I mean, he was quite aggressive, took out Soleimani, did a lot of bombing of Iran. Iran retaliated in a very measured way, so it never escalated into a war. What do you think is going to happen this time around? I mean, Israel's been itching for this war for a long time. This might be their final shot with this guy in office.
Well, look, I noticed that in Donald Trump's joint speech to Congress, he did not mention Israel once. Not once did he mention Israel or what was going on. The next day, it was then leaked and revealed that the U.S. government and the Trump administration are in direct talks with Hamas. And ever since then, it looks like Donald Trump has been trying to performatively demonstrate how pro-Israel he is. He grabbed the most popular, well-known leader of the Columbia student protests, and he's trying to deport him, Mahmoud Khalil. And now he's bombing Yemen, which Biden did as well. We remember Biden also made a big show of bombing Yemen. And part of me wonders if Trump is realizing that in order to move against Israel's wishes, he's going to need to theatrically do things that will make Israel's supporters happy. Israel's not happy that Trump is talking to Hamas. Israel's certainly not thrilled that he didn't use his State of the Union to rev up support for them. And it looks like, and from what we're hearing, I mean, different leaks, that some kind of deal regarding the Israel-Palestine conflict that may not be what Netanyahu wants is in the works. And it looks to me like Trump is trying to theatrically show not Israel itself, but Americans who support Israel, people that are in his camp that support Israel, that he's on their side. Look, they hate those protesters at Columbia. He's deporting Mahmoud Khalil. Look how angry they are about it. Oh, look what he's doing. Oh, now he's bombing the Houthis. See, he's showing them how powerful America is. And I feel like there's a hope. I mean, just a possibility that this is Trump setting the stage to actually rebuke Israel in a really dramatic way with some kind of agreement to end the conflict. I can only hope. But I mean, what Trump is doing with the Houthis is really, really dangerous. And I mean, if he ends up attacking Iran in response to something that the Houthis do, that's World War III at that point. I mean, Russia and China are friends of Iran, and at that point we're in a World War III scenario, which is exactly what Donald Trump was elected not to do, and
Right.
exactly what his base is opposing. And I am blown away by how many people in Trump's camp are speaking out against the bombing of Yemen, saying they don't want a new war, speaking up in support of Mahmoud Khalil, a leftist protester. I'm blown away. People who say MAGA is a cult, oh, MAGA, they all just think what Trump thinks. I mean, yeah, there are plenty of people in the camp that do that, but there are plenty that aren't. And
Right.
I'm impressed. The anti-war principles, many people in the MAGA camp don't want to hear it. And, when Trump lashed out at Thomas Massie, a Republican who was critical of Israel, I saw a lot of people that in the Trump camp speaking up on his behalf. So there are contradictions here. Let's see how they play out.
Yeah, that has been one of the biggest things that I've been most impressed about with the right, with Republicans and MAGA. Democrats, they just fall in line no matter what. They parrot the robotic talking points that they're given, and they're not allowed to step out of line. I mean, the Democrats have been the most anti-democratic party as far as not allowing any elections. I mean, they just shoved Kamala Harris down the Democrats' throats and said, "You're going to have, this is the candidate. You don't even get to have a primary. You don't get to vote. None of that." They force everybody to have the same exact talking points, the same opinions, or else. And yet, on the Republican side, I mean, even going back to 2016, the fact that Trump even won then showed that the Republicans did not have as strong of a firm grip on their process as Democrats, who just control it completely and decided, no, it's Hillary Clinton's turn and that's it. We're not going to hear any of it. And yet, they allowed Donald Trump through. And then, as we've seen, and Donald Trump's again through, and just like what you're mentioning, I mean, that the infighting on the Republican side is refreshing. That is what should be happening even on the Democrat side, but we never ever see that. But the Republicans are battling it out, and it is really great to see. It's hopeful to see that, even though our politicians are all collectively bought off by Israel, they're all in lockstep except for Thomas Massie. It is really nice. And Marjorie Taylor Greene surprised me. I mean, the fact that she not only said Americans, I've never heard an American say they want another war in the Middle East, like not hearing it from anybody. And then for her to add, especially a war for another country, not even just say, we don't want this war, we want to get out of there, but to actually call out Israel like that and say a war for another country, that there's some interesting stuff going on the Republican side. And you're right, it does make me a bit hopeful as well. I'm a little hopeful that, Trump is a wild card. He plays a weird game with his negotiation style where he'll kind of bully, he's like bullying and bullying and bullying. But then at the end of the day, the killing has stopped. And that is one thing that, as much as he's a big bully, I mean, now we have the killing again, right? We've got the killing is ramped up again, but it's especially Israel with Gaza blowing up children again, women and children again. It's terrible. But there was a period of time, and this is much better than Biden ever did, where, right now we've got a potential deal in Russia and Ukraine where that killing will stop. And for a while, the killing did stop in Palestine, and Trump was responsible for making that deal happen. But he's also got to be responsible for pushing Israel and getting them to go back into phase two or into another agreement without killing all of these women and children. And then they say, well, but we killed some Hamas leaders too. Okay, that doesn't justify killing all of the children. And that's what the world is saying. So, maybe you're right. Maybe this is a game he's playing where he's trying to drum up the support from the pro-Israel crowd just to keep them placated while he does something else behind the scenes. I mean, one can hope, right? But right now the killing is resumed, and now we're bombing Yemen. And most people don't even know where the hell Yemen is.
Indeed. I mean, we're getting mixed signals from the Trump administration. Tulsi Gabbard had moved to appoint someone to be deputy director of intelligence who was critical of Israel, and then backed down from that. And then Tulsi Gabbard,
Colonel Daniel Davis, right? It wasn't he the one that was, and he's great.
Indeed.
He's great. He's
Yeah.
so America first. And I mean, he is great. And yet but because he has an America first position when it comes to Israel, they didn't want him.
Yeah, but the fact that they even floated the idea sent a pretty clear message, and that at this point, I mean, we're getting mixed signals from the Trump administration. That's very, very clear. We don't know exactly what's happening. We do know that Tulsi Gabbard does brag that she prevented World War III by advising Trump in his previous administration, and the reason she wanted the job of being the director of national intelligence and briefing the president every day is she wanted to be in the position to prevent World War III once again. So let's hope that cooler heads are prevailing behind closed doors. Yeah.
Well, but at the same time, with Tulsi, she is very she switched to becoming pro-Israel. She was critical of Israel back in 2017, 2018. When they were doing the mowing the lawn campaigns in Gaza. But she has since become ultra pro-Israel. She just tweeted out the other day about she's sounding the alarm about the rise of radical Islam in Bangladesh. Bangladesh. I don't want to have anything to do with Bangladesh. China and India can figure that out. If they've got a problem with radical Islamists rising up in Bangladesh, I'm pretty sure China and India, and not only that, they've got the population to deal with it. If we're going to go to war with Islamic terrorists in Bangladesh, then how about we let the two countries that have over 1 billion people each go to war rather than our country with 330 million? I mean, but it was the gaslighting of we have to fight all these Islamic terrorists. And that's been my big beef with Tulsi, even though I was a big supporter of hers, when it was just nauseating to constantly hear about the Islamic terrorists. And it's like, how could you be anti-regime change and anti-war, but you are still pro-war on terror when the terror is these Islamic terrorism? And the reason why I think she liked, I don't know if she liked, I wouldn't put it that way, but why she was skeptical of Syria and Assad and the U.S. intervention campaign there was because Assad was not an Islamic terrorist or an Islamic radical. Assad had a different religious outlook. And so that was more, I guess, amenable to her versus, and look, like, I don't like the radical Islamic terrorists either, but I'm sure a ton of groups in Africa, for example, all throughout the continent that are massacring people and insane to me. And yet we don't even know their names. We don't know their beliefs, and we don't care because it's not our neck of the woods. But we do when it comes to radical Islamic terror for whatever reason.
I think the primary disagreement that Tulsi Gabbard has is that these forces in Bangladesh, like the forces that brought down the Syrian Arab Republic and are now in power in Syria, were backed by American and Western intelligence as proxies, that nationalist and independent governments are targeted mainly by the Muslim Brotherhood, which is a longtime proxy of the West that was first used against Abdul Nasser, the Arab nationalist leader in Egypt, and then later to foment uprisings in Syria and elsewhere. And that the strategy of the Obama administration was to use the Muslim Brotherhood to target governments they don't like and spread their particular brand of Islamic extremism and use it to target governments. And I think the government of Bangladesh, which is very strategic, and China is in that region, et cetera, that for geostrategic reasons, it appears the United States was trying to utilize Islamic forces in Bangladesh, and that has resulted in attacks on other religious communities. And I
Right.
think that's more the concern. And, Mahmoud Khalil is an interesting case. I support him as a matter of principle because I do not believe that your political views should be grounds for deportation. But many people have pointed out Mahmoud Khalil is a regime change activist. And he worked in Beirut, I believe, at the British Embassy at one point, and he's been heavily involved in efforts to destabilize Syria. And that there is kind of a shadow war within the deep state, and that the Obama faction, which is more tied in with the NATO countries, they liked the idea of using certain Islamic groups as proxies. Tulsi Gabbard and her current, which is closer to the Pentagon and the military rather than the intelligence apparatus, they say that's too dangerous. This could backfire. And, they look at the rise of ISIS, they look at 9/11, things like that, and they say, no, this strategy of rewarding people with visas to come to the United States because they do the dirty work of the United States around the world, this strategy of utilizing various extremist groups and, sicking them on governments we don't like in Libya or Syria or elsewhere, that's got to be gotten rid of. I think there's a
Right.
strategic difference there.
Well, I mean, I would agree if I'd heard her say something like that, but I'm not really hearing her say we're the ones who are actually spreading which we have been. I mean, this is something I've talked about for years, how the US encouraged Saudi Arabia, for example, with their Wahhabi ideology to go and spread it all around to destabilize the Middle East. And then when the US started criticizing Saudi Arabia about it after 9/11, Saudi Arabia said, wait a minute, we did that. You were the ones we didn't want to do it. You're the ones who wanted us to do it. And so we did it. And we've seen that now even spread to Asia in the efforts to stop China, the expansion of China, the Belt and Road Initiative. We're seeing, strangely, coincidentally, the rise of Islamic terror everywhere where the Belt and Road is trying to move along. Somebody connect the dots there. I think I would agree if we were calling out that effort, but I'm not really seeing a real calling out of that. The Mahmoud Khalil, though, that's interesting that you bring that up. And look, I mean, if the guy was responsible in Beirut for regime change, and if he was actually facilitating regime change, that would be a legitimate reason to deport the guy out of the country and revoke his green card, right? Not free speech, not protesting and sharing a political opinion, but actually acting as a rogue agent trying to destabilize a different country. The problem is our country wanted people to actually destabilize Syria, right? So they were never going to deport the guy for something that they were actually supporting. I mean, that's the ridiculousness of this situation.
Yeah. No, I mean, it is particularly wild. I know, Tulsi Gabbard is very close to a lot of forces that are sympathetic to India and the Modi government. And,
Yeah.
you talked about Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia has funded what are called Deobandi schools in India, where they preach and teach Wahhabism to the Muslim minority in India. And there have been bombings and there have been terrorist attacks. And Pakistan has also suffered with Deobandi extremists that go into Pakistan. And, and that there are a number of forces around the world that see how dangerous the Wahhabi wing of Islam, as well as the Muslim Brotherhood wing of Islam are, and really don't appreciate the United States using them. One of those forces is Russia. And I think, if you listen to Michael Flynn and if you listen to Tulsi Gabbard, they realize Russia is very, very useful in standing up and fighting these forces. For example,
Mhm.
Russia warned America about the Tsarnaev brothers who blew up the Boston Marathon. The Russian intelligence went to the United States and they said, watch these two Chechen guys. We've been monitoring their activity online. They're in certain circles. They're very dangerous. The U.S. government didn't listen. And look what happened at the Boston Marathon. And I think,
Yeah.
Michael Flynn, Tulsi Gabbard think, hey, if the Russians, who've been fighting Wahhabi and Islamic extremists for quite some time and dealing with them, mainly because our government was propping them up against the Soviet Union, et cetera, if they can be helpful in preventing terrorist attacks, why not work with them? Well,
Mhm.
Russia bad, human rights, Putin, blah, 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 blah. There are different agendas, I think, within the deep state. And that's how we can explain Tulsi Gabbard. And yeah, Israel is the issue. And that, many people have pointed out that so much of conservatism incorporated, or conservatainment, or whatever you want to talk about, is bankrolled by pro-Israeli people that maybe they're more friendly to Ukraine, and maybe they'd be willing to see a peace deal in Ukraine, but Israel is a red line. And I know people who've worked in the Trump campaign and things like that, and they've said, look, that even though your average Trump supporter is not really that pro-Israel, they might have some support, but unless they're like a really dedicated evangelical, a member of a church that is strongly Christian Zionist, they're really not that, committed to supporting Israel. But when it comes to the foundations and the nonprofits and the entities that dominate the conservative world, and the blogs and the media, Daily Wire, things like that, if you got something negative to say about Israel, you're out of there.
Yeah.
And it's a matter of, pro-Israeli entities dominate conservatism, even though read the comment sections. Read the comment sections. Your average conservative just doesn't feel Israel is their duty. And let's also remember, and we can go way back, right? Before the rise of the neocons, you had the old right in the United States. You had Joe McCarthy. And who was very key in exposing that Joe McCarthy was gay and, bringing down Joe McCarthy? That was Hank Greenspun. Who was out of Las Vegas, who was a Mossad agent, and that to some degree or other, Joe McCarthy was considered by Israel to be a threat. Joe McCarthy and the McCarthyist old right, they thought Israel, because it had gotten some support from the Soviet Union because of the kibbutz and all of that, they thought Israel might be a little too communist, and that Israel and the Mossad had a lot to do with bringing down Joe McCarthy and the old right. And it was really with the rise of the neocons that pro-Israeli sentiment was popular on the right. When Israel started out, it was trying to sell itself as a progressive lefty, socialist commune in the desert, right? And it was the hard right conservatives who didn't like it, and it was the liberals who were big supporters of Israel. And that started to shift in 1978 with the rise of Menachem Begin, and Israel and the revisionist party and Likud and other kind of forces started to dominate, and Israel became more of a right-wing cause, as around the world it was the Soviet Union and their allies that were opposing Israel. So there's been kind of a flip, but there are a lot of people in the old right, the more libertarian, John Birch Society, conservative wing of things, that don't think Israel is so great and don't see a duty there. And that is more consistent with that political perspective.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm hoping that some of the conservative voices that are really against all of this, that are against that are questioning, why in the world are we over there? Why are we doing all of this? I'm hoping that sentiment just really does resonate within the people. Anecdotally, like I said, just going to the bar, listening to people, it's a mixed bag, with the average American right now in a very conservative area amongst conservatives. But the fact that it is a mixed bag, is hopeful, right? It's hopeful that there are those that sit there and say, "Now I don't want anything to do with this or the Middle East. I just want to get out. Time's up. Let's move on." So let's hope that faction rises up and gets stronger. I think it is, though. I think the sentiment is growing, not waning on that
Yeah,
front.
well, Israel is almost like the elephant in the room. I remember, I was in high school during the 2004 presidential election. And you remember that year, I think Pat Buchanan said it was Michael Moore versus Mel Gibson, right? And it was, Passion of the Christ was the big movie that summer, and so was Fahrenheit 9/11. And Mel Gibson, we know, has said some things about Israel and is quite critical. And Michael Moore dedicated one of his books to Rachel Corrie, the American citizen who was bulldozed to death. And that
Yeah.
the left and the right, if you go to the grassroots of your rank and file dedicated right winger, your rank and file dedicated left winger, there's not love for Israel. Israel has really embedded itself in the political establishment, but among people that are serious in American politics, in the left, in the right, etc., there is kind of a resentment about the stranglehold that they have over our political system, and that anger is coming more visible every day.
Yeah.
We'll just have to see how this plays out. That's all I can say.
Well, Caleb, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it. Caleb Maupin, journalist, political analyst, also the co-director for the Center for Political Innovation, author of Who Are the Houthis? What Are They Fighting For? Where can people grab this book?
You can get it pretty much anywhere books are sold. It's got very widespread distribution. There's also a free audiobook if you want to listen to it on Rumble. You can listen to the whole thing as an audiobook on Rumble. So,
Okay.
yeah. Yeah, get yourself a copy. It's not very long. I made it short and concise. The idea was to tell the story of who the Houthis are and where their movement came from, who these people really are, and what they're fighting for. I just wanted to make it available to people.
Thank you so much, Caleb. Thank you so much for being here.
Sure thing.
Thanks for watching this clip from the full Kim Iverson show, which has a new show time. Catch the full Kim Iverson show, 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern. Head to KimIversonShow.com. See you there.